Hello. Okay, so I don't really know how to start this video. This is kind of... I want to get out of the way immediately that this video is entirely unscripted. Like, I have a basic plan and like a couple of talking points written down for what I want to discuss in this video, but generally I'm just going to be sort of saying what's on my mind when I talk about things, and there are some points that I might come back to if I think of something else to talk about. But, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. It's been a very interesting year for me. Not a particularly good one, I will say, but I hope that this one's going to be better. I'm planning on making quite a few different lifestyle changes for myself to make myself, a better person, live a healthier life, stuff like that. And the other thing more important to this video is last night, me and my friend Megacomed played Project Eden's Garden, the Danganronpa fan game. And it's largely because I wanted to play with them that I didn't really make any videos on this fangan myself for the YouTube channel, even though I probably really should have. But last night we completed all of Chapter 1. It took us like a couple weeks because we had scheduling problems, but last night we managed to get the entire trial done in a sitting, and we managed to reach the end of the chapter. And this video is basically just going to be me going over what my thoughts were on Eden's Garden. Normally, I do this kind of thing on Tumblr a lot. I do this thing on my Tumblr arts blog, Danganronpa Survivor, and this video will be being uploaded there as well, where I normally do these little talk sessions, but I do it in the form of writing. This is the first time I'm ever doing it in the form of a video. And yeah, like I said, I don't really know how to start this, so I've given you the basic premise, and let's just get into it. Also, if I cough a little bit during this video, or if I clear my throat at any point, I apologize for that. I'm not feeling particularly well. I haven't been so for the past couple months. But anyway, yeah. Let's start by talking about the chapter itself and the characters. Okay, so right out of the gate, I think the first thing I really want to say about this chapter that really got me by the hook is definitely the characters, which in any Danganronpa or Fanganronpa, there has to be a good cast of characters to really get you gripped. But the thing is, during Eden's Garden's prologue, which was a fairly lengthy prologue, it had full introductions, a lot of character moments, and even a mock class trial to sort of get you into the mechanics and show everyone, which I think was a really good idea because it allowed everyone who had still yet to die a chance to really show off what they could do in the trial. But to be perfectly honest, that chapter, I wasn't particularly... Well, I'm not gonna say I wasn't, interested in the characters, because I was. They were definitely a very interesting lineup, and some of them gripped me pretty quickly. But it was only when we actually got to Chapter 1 of this game that I really started to see how these guys acted in their day-to-day lives, and that really vastly improved my opinions on quite a lot of them. This is genuinely such a good cast. Even the characters who are kind of jerkish, I guess, or the characters that I don't like as much, I still think are definitely around, I want to say B tier at worst. There were also a lot of character dynamics to happen in this chapter that we actually got to explore, and I think those were some of my favorite parts when those characters sort of interacted. For example, I think, the big one is obviously, that carries on into the trial later, is Grace and Wolfgang. And I genuinely wish that we got to see... One of the things I was kind of disappointed about is I genuinely do wish that we got to see a bit more of those two interacting, beyond, just the couple of scenes that they had. Just, a one-on-one interaction, I think, is what I'm saying. But Grace and Wolfgang had a really interesting dynamic in the prologue, and that carried over to Chapter 1. Then there's also Jet and Mark, and Jet and Mark, so far, to me, seem like what's going on with them, I have a distinct feeling is going to be very similar to what we got with Himiko and Tenko, where it's like Mark is the antisocial, quiet one who doesn't really want anything to do with this, and he sort of like keeps his distance from people or like finds interacting with people a pain. And Jet, on the other hand, is this incredibly lively, bubbly, if a little lacking in common sense character who's just trying to like cheer that character up. That's sort of what Tenko had with Himiko, but without like the creepy aspect of it, I guess, because Tenko was a bit predatory during the early chapters of V3. I do feel that this could be a setup to later parts of the story where one of them dies and the other one sort of has to carry that. I think Jet is probably going to be the one who dies, but I'll get to that at the end of the video. Ulysses and Winona was an interesting duo as well that I wasn't expecting, and this is one that I'm actually looking forward to seeing more of. Desmond and Eloise, I want to see how that unfolds, because I don't really see how that could happen. There's also Toshiko and Ingrid, and of course, I think the big one for a lot of people was Damon and Kai. And this was the first chapter we got to really see Kai as like a front and center character, and we got to see more about him instead of just being this jerk-ass influencer, I guess. And I will get back to him in a moment, because I'm going to be talking about the free time events. But as far as the events of Chapter 1 go, I think it's a really solid opening. But I think compared to the first chapter of 2, and especially V3, and I know that it's probably rude for me to be continuously comparing Eden's Garden to Danganronpa, because that's not a very respectful thing to do with fangans. I understand this, because they're all their own beast. But still, if you're going to be copying the format, it's hard not to make comparisons. And yeah, Eden's Garden is its sort of own project, but I'm still going to be making comparisons largely because Danganronpa is my main point of reference, and it's sort of my way of doing this review, of being like, oh, they did this definitely better, or they did this worse. But as far as Chapter 1 goes, it's kind of uneventful. Like, I'm not upset by that at all, because it was, again, it gave us a bunch of really interesting character moments, but nothing that really felt like a conducive story. And I think the two big standouts for me, though, are how the mock trial and the announcer of the killing game, it really, really feels tense right from the get-go with this game, whereas it didn't really feel that way towards Danganronpa, most of the time at least. I feel like 2 and V3's first chapters were rather tense, but I think for V3 that was mostly because of Kaede trying to like force everyone to get out, or like try and push them beyond their limits to get out. And then when Monokuma just said, I'm gonna kill everyone, and that really just sort of rocketed the tension. But for Eden's Garden, it's much more subtle, and someone on Tumblr, I don't remember who, so if you are watching this video, good job, because I did read your post, and I think you made a really good point. Someone made a point of saying that, like, throughout most of Chapter 1, people are wary of Wolfgang and Eva, not Wolfgang, sorry. People are wary of Damon and Eva because Wolfgang called them out on their behavior at the end of the trial. Whereas Damon was everyone was sort of saying, like, acting optimistic, whereas Damon was being significantly more realistic and saying, oh, we can't guarantee what you guys are saying. And the problem is Damon is right, but Wolfgang just didn't Wolfgang was so desperate to make sure that the group could stay together that he kind of steered it so that everyone should be wary and afraid of Damon, which puts Damon in a rough spot right from the get-go, and Eva too, because of her like agreeing with this, as well as her ultimate liar talent, which again, that's a whole other thing, but I'll get to that in a second. But the irony of it is the fact that despite everyone claiming not to take Damon's words too seriously, a lot of Chapter 1 is them forming contingency plans in case a murder does happen. And that shows to me that they're definitely taking what he said a lot more seriously than they pretend to. And as for Eva, this is sort of a very interesting character arc that we get through this chapter that all culminates to the very end of it in a rather catastrophic way. I don't mean in terms of writing, but just in terms of the actual emotions it is. Where we kind of find out, and the one thing that really blindsided me this chapter, and that I wasn't expecting, and I kind of thought that there was gonna be like an excuse later where we found out, no, this was a fake out, but no. It turned out to be exactly what was shown, as it turns out that Eva actually isn't the ultimate liar like she and the game advertised. She's actually just the ultimate mathlete. And this, at first, was like just a minor thing, but then I will get to it when we talk about the trial, but I do love how all of this tension and the stuff that surrounds Eva's real talent and her real intentions of being the ultimate mathlete, how that all culminates in the trial. And again, I will cross that bridge when I actually talk about Eva in the trial and Wolfgang's death and stuff like that. But in case it wasn't obvious, I will leave a warning at the beginning of the video of spoilers, but genuinely, I know I probably already spoiled it, but please don't watch this video until you finish, don't watch the rest of this video until you finish Eden's Garden yourself, or if you're actually not interested. But yeah, Eva's the ultimate mathlete. That was quite a shocking revelation. And the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the characters as well is the free time events that we did. Okay, so I played through Chapter 1 of Eden's Garden twice. I played it once with Mega Comet, and I played up to right before the gaming session on my own. And the reason I did this is because when I was playing with them, we did the free time events that they wanted to do. But when I actually got control, I got to do the free time events that I wanted to do. And so what happened was, for the first playthrough that we did together, we did Cassidy and Kai's free time events. And then, we did Cassidy's 2 that she gets in this chapter, and we did the first of Kai's, and then I went and watched the rest of Kai's on YouTube later. In my own playthrough, because she was one of the characters who I was most interested in seeing, I did Eloise's. And I actually really, really loved... I mean, Cassidy's was fine. I feel like there'll be more important stuff later, but for now she only has 2, and I wasn't particularly gripped by what she was talking about in hers. But for the record, and I haven't gone through the rest of the FTEs yet, Kai's and Eloise's were really good, and for different reasons. Kai's is... I'll talk about his first, because those are the ones that we did, that I looked after first, and Kai is a much more predominant character in Chapter 1 of Eden's Garden. It got off to a really good start with the fact that when he's talking about posting videos, or posting photos on the internet, Damon immediately jumps to the conclusion that he was doing pin-up shoots, sexy pin-up shoots, and he's like, no, I was wearing clothes, damn it. It's like, why would you think that? And that was really funny to me. But the rest of his free time events are surprisingly really engaging, and it really made me rethink my opinion of him for being just a potential dumbass character like Kazuichi, or just some kind of subtle jerk-ass guy that was just gonna be really, really annoying. He's really good, because a lot of his free time events talk about how he's suffered at the hands of things like cancel culture and being caught in scandals that he had no control over, which for anyone who has a big internet presence, I feel they can really understand that. There's not very many instances in games where you can meet a character like Kai who has been through the struggles of what fame brings, and it really, really highlights what Grace was saying about him in the prologue, about how he's kind of an influencer who will sick his fans onto people he doesn't like or people who call him out. But when he actually fully explains the situation, it becomes, assuming he's telling the truth, and I don't really see why he wouldn't be, the fact that his fans are so hostile is largely because the people who are hating on Kai, for what are arguably pretty dumb reasons because they don't know the full story, are equally as hostile. And it's a unfortunately very common thing in the world for people to get hate and for people to call people out on shit that they don't understand or that they don't have any insight in. They are just very, very content with just like ruining somebody's life over something that they cannot possibly have had any control in, because they don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. They have no understanding of the industry, but they have to be the bigger person and pretend they do, and that's an unfortunately very common thing on the internet. And the way that Kai's free time events kind of highlight this and how he's struggled with it, but how he's also claimed that he has come very close to deleting his socials, but kept them up because of the people that still care about him. I really resonate with that. I'm not a particularly big content creator on the internet, and I'm aware of this much, but I feel like largely the reason why I keep doing the things I do in the community is because I have a specific number of people who are willing to have my back on them. And I just really love that his free time events highlighted this. ELOISE's free time events, on the other hand, I am very glad to say did not disappoint me either. And it was, like, from start to finish, when you actually look at all of the stuff that you discuss, I mainly went into it because I was curious about what sort of character ELOISE is and why she is the way that she is, why she's so mean despite being a fencer. And there's a story here, and it's really interesting, especially with the way it ends. And if you've done the FTEs, then you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, let me kind of just explain what's going on. So, what happens is throughout ELOISE's FTE, she sort of talks about how she was a fencer and how she became a fencer for joining a club, but eventually she reveals that the reason she became the ultimate fencer isn't because she won a bunch of matches. It's because people refused to fight her. And in a fencing tournament, forfeiting a match counts as a victory for the opponent. So if I was to forfeit a match against ELOISE, ELOISE would be the winner of that match by default. And the reason why she kind of climbed the ranks is because people kept forfeiting against her. And that made me really curious. I was like, why? And then, when we got to FTE 4, I kind of started to get an idea. And ELOISE is definitely my favorite character so far because of how much potential she has to develop, either positively or negatively. And as of right now, negatively seems more likely. ELOISE to me so far feels like Mikan, kind of. Like, in the fact that she underwent a bit of a personality shift, and Mikan in Danganronpa 2 goes crazy because she gets afflicted by the despair disease. But one of my biggest problems with Chapter 3 of Danganronpa 2 is I think it would have been more interesting to have Mikan as a killer if her motivation was less tied to the disease and her obsession with her beloved, and more to do with the fact that she has this already natural underlying level of sadism that we already know is there with her character, because of how her nursing people means she's the one in control and in power, and the fact that Hiyoko, who was absolutely terrible to her throughout the whole game, it could have just been easily a situation where Hiyoko just bullied Mikan into oblivion and Mikan just lost it, snapped, and ended up killing. And I feel, given the way ELOISE acted not just in the FTEs, but in the chapter investigation and trial, especially towards Grace, I feel like they're doing something very similar with her. And I don't obviously want to say right out of the gate that ELOISE is a psycho. I really, really don't think she is, and I sincerely hope she's not. But I do get the feeling that she could be a killer later down the line. I don't really know who could be her victim in this case. I feel like one big thing that could happen is maybe Jet is one of, if not the only, victim of Chapter 3. ELOISE is his killer, and kind of similar to V33, but hopefully not nearly as dumb. Whereas Jet also has a tendency... This is the way I can kind of see it happening, is Jet has a tendency to sort of say things like as he thinks them. He doesn't really have much of a filter, and this got him in trouble in Chapter 1 when he just like blurted out the fact that he blurted out Toshiko's blackmail that he received in front of everyone, and then got told off by Ingrid, and that's the problem with Jet. He doesn't really have much of a filter. Whereas in Eloise's FTEs, when Damon starts talking about her life and sort of speaking bluntly about his opinions on Eloise, it eventually puts Eloise in a state where she's just pissed at him. Like, she's just like genuinely angry, like cusses him out and just like really rudely berates him. And I feel like there's an element there where I feel like what could happen is Jet could just be Jet, say something like without really thinking about it, and that could get Eloise to snap, and then that's kind of how that all works out. But again, I will get back to this at the end of the video. But the thing is, the other likely candidate is Grace, but I do think Grace is going to get some development in the near future, so I really doubt she's going to be sticking around for less than 3 chapters. Also, Grace is not, despite the fact that she is very rude to Eloise, is not nearly as bad as Hiyoko was to Mikan. She's just rough around the edges more than anything, and considering she talks about how the golfing industry is far more cutthroat than it seems, especially for a young woman, then it's less of her being rude and more treating everyone like a potential enemy and doubting everyone's intentions. I mean, it's kind of the same reason why she did things like she punched Damon on sight, she stopped everyone from investigating Wolfgang's room, and demanded her blackmail from Eloise in such a vicious way. But speaking of that, actually, going on from my previous point, I do feel that there is a really, based on what Eloise did say in her free time event, I actually feel that there is a lot of potential for some kind of dynamic between Grace and Eloise, largely because of the way that they parallel each other. And what I mean by that is, Grace implies quite a few times, I think, I haven't done her FTEs, but I assume she probably talks more about it there, but in the first couple of chapters of Eden's Garden, in Prologue and Chapter 1, it's pretty much said, or at least insinuated, the reason why Grace is so cross and harsh and competitive is the fact that she has had to fight tooth and nail in the golfing industry to get to where she is. She said as much in the prologue during her introduction, like when Wolfgang was like, "Oh, I thought most golf players were older men, but you're a fairly young woman." And she was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I had to fight to get where I am. Most of us do." Which like shows that the golf industry is far more cutthroat than you might anticipate. Eloise, on the other hand, as I said, got to where she was by literally not having to lift a finger, because the other members of her fencing club were too scared to face off against her. And she climbs the ranks because, again, forfeiting the match counts as a win, so the main reason she became the ultimate fencer isn't necessarily because she can fight, but because people don't want to fight her. And Damon even says that if it hadn't been for the fact that she knew all the terminology or had a teacher, he'd sincerely doubt that she was an ultimate to begin with. But again, to shed more light on what actually happened in Eloise's FTEs, in the 4th one, they talk about their family, and Damon tells Eloise that he makes so much money through winning debate competitions that his parents don't really need to work anymore. And Eloise kind of says that it's a similar case with her and her fencing, because she lives with her mother and 2 younger sisters, but her sisters are kind of ungrateful for the life that she's giving them, and she worries about her mother having to take care of them. To which Damon asks her if her mother has a boyfriend or a girlfriend that can help her out, and he chooses the word boyfriend specifically because Eloise never mentions anything about having a father, and as Damon pries, this pisses her off. As far as Eloise's family situation goes, I don't really have any comments, at least not yet, because it could be almost anything at this point in time and we have no context. But based on Eloise's nature, I do have 2 lines of thinking of what could happen with her. The first is that I think she has some sort of anger problems, which again is another parallel to Grace, who has anger issues and doesn't really hide them. But I think Eloise probably has some kind of rage issue, and this anger caused her to badly hurt people in a match before. And the thing with fencing is that it's a very elegant style of dueling. It's not like violent sword clashing, it's more like just quick parrying, trying to disarm your opponent. It's refined, it's not especially violent, but there could be an element of violence to Eloise that who we know couldn't control. And the way she climbed up the ranks is probably because people know about this very dangerous side to her, the fact that she's a very dangerous opponent, and thus don't want to mess with her, right? But the other alternative is that there is, based on what we've seen so far, a very real possibility of there being some degree of sadism to her character throughout her actions. Because in the investigation segment of this chapter, when Grace blocks the door to Wolfgang's room and prevents anyone from investigating, Eloise very subtly threatens her and says that she'll call Tozu to move her if she doesn't move herself, knowing full well that Grace especially has just been repeatedly abused by Tozu and is probably terrified of him even if she doesn't show it. And then that carries over again at the beginning of the trial when Eloise almost immediately puts the suspicion on Grace and is being like, maybe she's acting outspoken because she was blocking the door. And I guess we never really found out why Grace was blocking the door. At least I don't really remember. But the thing is, this method works. The way Eloise subtly threatens Grace works, and the way that she tries to put suspicion on her works as well. And you can always say, oh no, she did this because she knew it would work, but that still shows that there's a methodical side to Eloise that she doesn't show normally. And there's something so sinister about the way that her dialogue completely changes tone, and how she speaks very directly about it, instead of beating around the bush or hesitates like she always does. But enough, moving on from Eloise a little bit, if I have one more thing I want to say about the characters, it's largely the fact that a lot of them are shown to be far smarter than they let on initially. Like, I think particularly Jean and Kai, because the two of them were initially set up to kind of be a brutish himbo and kind of just some narrow-minded influencer dude. But both of them actually pull their weight quite heavily in the trial, and Jean is a man of much honor, and it made me respect him a lot more. And I think generally, what really, really grips me is the fact that right out of the gate, this is the first time where right out of the gate, I genuinely think I like every single one of these characters. Like, I can't think of a single person in this cast who rubs me the wrong way. If I had to say who I think the worst character in this game was, I'd probably have to say Mara, only because Mara has had no screen time. Like, it's been a year since the prologue happened, and she still has no sprites. And I find that strange. But everyone else here just seems really, really, like, decent. I've got some really good character writing here, and again, I will go into this now, and more in a bit. But obviously there's one character that kind of stands out, and now we're actually going to be talking about the trial and investigation, because that's all I really have to say about the daily life segment. And that's Wolfgang, obviously. Wolfgang being the victim is definitely the best plot twist in this whole chapter, and one that I genuinely didn't see coming, despite the fact that Wolfgang, upon reflection, really does fit to the same sorts of roles as, Imposter does in Danganronpa 2, where he's kind of this group's leader, and you might argue that based on experience, that means he's probably the most likely to die. But the thing is, because of the way that Wolfgang already had so much character, like, being set up for him, and so much more secrets behind him, there was so much tension being built around him, and sort of implications that he might not be the nice guy that he came across, made me think that what was going to happen is we were going to get into the trial, and it was going to be revealed that Wolfgang is actually just kind of a messed up person. Speaking of gremlins, right about you, Wolfgang. Me?
Soybean.
22 years old and already a lawyer. That confirms it. You did start college as a teenager.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yes, all this information is accurate.
He goes dot dot dot, and then he goes. Yes, now you discovered my dark past. I'm actually a teenager in college. Now I'm evil. Are you okay?
No!
Despite the fact that everybody trusted him, and then Damon obviously ends up earning everyone's ire because of him, and Wolfgang really, really did just feel like he was being set up to be Damon's rival, and when he died, that blindsided the hell out of me. And then after that, when we actually get to see the circumstances behind why he died and what actually happened, there are some stuff there. So when he attacks, Wolfgang is the one who brought the knife to the scene, which we initially thought killed him. But the reason he brought that is largely because he had he was lured there by Eva as well as Diana to frame Diana for the crime. And what happens is Eva stabs him with a hallucinogenic, and Wolfgang basically has a trauma attack and attacks Diana as a result of it. But the situation, really, I was not expecting it. Like, I did expect there was going to be some level of trauma for Wolfgang. And by the way, I'm probably playing the clip of him going through his panic attack right now. The sprite work that happens in this segment is amazing. Like, genuinely, I love Wolfgang's knife sprites. They're so good. But there's definitely more to him that we'll probably find out later, especially because we really got cucked by the fact that Damon and his blackmail and his parents in there. And one person online who I saw make a theory about it is the fact that if you look at the photo, just as Wolfgang's dad kind of looks like him, Wolfgang's mom kind of looks like Diana. So the theory going around now is that Wolfgang saw Diana and his hallucinations made him think that Diana was his mother or his father, right? And that's sort of what got him to panic attack, right? So Wolfgang's trauma was a very interesting part, and honestly, as a result of it, I genuinely think I was wrong about the fact that he was a more sinister person than he came across. I think he's just kind of mentally hurt and damaged and needed help, but he was so busy helping other people that he never gave anyone the chance to help him. And I think this is largely some stuff that both Toshiko and Grace sort of reflect upon in the trial. But the other thing as well, and why I still do kind of think that there's something up with him, and I pointed this out when I played it with my friend, is Damon says in the trial that Wolfgang brought the knife in self-defense because it was the reasonable thing to do. Like, he was being lured somewhere. He probably had a feeling it was a trap, but felt he should go there anyway just in case it was his blackmail. But what I pointed out at the time is that when it came to getting a weapon to defend himself with, which was a reasonable thing to do because he was still in a killing game and anything could happen, he specifically chose a knife, which is kind of universally known for being a lethal weapon. If Wolfgang was really the noble person that he claimed he was, chances are he would have picked a weapon more like the rolling pin that Eva used to knock him out initially. Something that could, like, incapacitate someone, not kill them. A knife feels way too deadly an option to pick for a self-defense weapon. Even if it was just to use to threaten, that's still kind of dark for the kind of character we've seen Wolfgang be portrayed as. So yeah, I still think there's something up with him. But yeah, definitely the most shocking victim rather. Definitely the most shocking first chapter victim I've ever seen in any of these fangans, because even if it's kind of obvious with the character development that he was getting, the way it was set up really made it feel like he was going to be the rival character for the rest of the game. It's kind of like what would happen if Teru Teru actually, like, stabbed Nagito in chapter 1 of 2. It's interesting that way. Following up from that, though, if I do have one slight complaint with the circumstances, it's largely how Diana fits into it. I'm gonna be honest, Diana's cool, but I feel sorry for the stuff that happened with her in this chapter, especially because of the circumstances and who it was that actually framed her for the crime. And it was really sweet, the fact that she had the means to incapacitate Wolfgang, she had the means to stop him, had the means to kill him, and just didn't take him because she didn't want to hurt him. But when it comes to light that Diana's like the only one with an alibi, everybody is really visceral in their reactions to it. Like, Diana is genuinely such a nice person, it makes me really confused that there wasn't a single person who was like, or no one really like particularly came forward and was like, hold on, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I know that like there's a precedent for characters like pretending to be nice and turning out to be like a lot more vicious, but I feel like they jumped the gun on Diana way too soon. All we did was like one accusation, a bit of evidence, and then everyone immediately locks her in as the killer. And I feel like that was pretty unfair and weird. Like, the trial genuinely has good pacing, but like this bit was strange to me. But yeah, as for what I think of the trial itself and the mystery that happens in it and the way that it's paced, as well as like the minigames and stuff that happens in it, I think it's a really good opening case. Like, the problem is, right from the get-go, the minute the idea of a party came up that not everyone went to, the minute that the idea of a party happening in the dining hall came up, as well as the fact that Wolfgang was killed in the boiler room, where literally, quite literally, the first thing that you ever do in this game is look through the vent in the boiler room to see that it connects to the dining hall, it made it really, really obvious that someone who was at the party was the killer. And I understand it was less of a whodunit and more of a howdunit, and that's not really a problem I had. Especially because everybody really got a chance to shine in this trial right from the get-go. And, the way that some of the clues come up and the way that everyone subtly contributes to the case is really, really fun. And this is what this trial was. It was fun. It was a really, really fun opening case. And this is kind of what I was saying about, a while back when on my Tumblr I did a review of the Danganronpa trials, like earlier, like at the end of last year. AKA the beginning of this year. For Christmas time, I was talking about the trials from the Danganronpa Another games by Lanuge, and I said that some of these cases aren't great, but they're fun, and that's largely what I want more than anything. Like, even if you do guess how things work out from the beginning, the fun part is actually, like, figuring out how the clues work together, and that's what made this trial so good, is the fact that you had everything you needed, and it was seeing how all of it fit together that really made it a worthwhile experience. Other things I want to note is this trial is fully voiced, which for more modern fan games is actually not that common. I feel like Despair Time doesn't have fully voiced trials, at least I don't think it does, because I haven't really watched most of the second chapter yet. But the first trial of Eden's Garden is fully voice acted, and the voice acting is so good in this part of the game in particular. Like, we obviously have the regular greats, but we also have like lots of really standout performances compared to what we've had so far. Particularly with, I think, by far my favorite character who was in this trial, my favorite voice performance, and kudos to you, is Darcy Maguire as Grace, or Lumisao, rather, I believe her name is. Fun fact, Lumisao, who voiced Grace, is actually also the English dub voice of Yuki in SDRA 2's official dub, and that's cool. Especially because in this one she gets to use her, I believe, her natural Australian accent. I don't know if I've got these facts right, don't quote me on this, but either way, she's amazing, especially during the rebuttal showdown point.
Sorry? You're sorry for accusing me of murder. Sorry doesn't cut it, you conniving two-faced bitch! If you really want my mercy, then get on your knees and beg for it! Shut the fuck up! What the fuck is wrong with you? Don't you see this is a trick? All of Diana's blubbering and crying is just a farce to make us think she's innocent. Diana wouldn't have to walking in. Because she could just lock the fucking door! I should have known. The kid who lied about her talents and tried to lie about the Tozy trinkets. I should have known. I should have known only Eva fucking Tanaka would kill Wolfgang!
And the fact that Grace has so many, like, just vicious lines of dialogue because she's genuinely so upset over the fact that Wolfgang is dead, and Wolfgang was kind of the one person that she trusted. This was kind of a heavy hitter for Grace, and Lumisao just absolutely killed it with it. Also, what's it? Sabrina Twyla, I hope I'm saying your name right. Sabrina Twyla, who voiced Cassidy, is definitely a standout for a lot of it, as is the Lusical, who voiced Eva. Definitely like a really, really good killer breakdown delivered by her. Definitely on the level of Marie Harrington's Celeste, like right immediately, and I think that's awesome.
My ears!
How would I know? How would I know when to drop it?
Drop what?
The battery! Damon says the killer dropped the battery when Diana was already in the boiler room. But how would I know when Diana was in the boiler room? It's not as if I could listen out for her. The music speakers are too loud. And the dining hall has no clocks, so it'd be impossible for me to know if it was 8:45 a.m. You're just trying to make me look bad. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just jealous of me. You're jealous of me and my talent. That's all you are. Jealous.
Hey, calm down.
Why not just pull out the console?
Yes, show us the console and then you'll be done with this.
No!
Eh?
I don't have to show anyone anything.
That's the most suspicious thing you could say.
That's such twisted logic. You're going to vote for me without being completely sure I'm even guilty?
But, one thing, the best part, and the one thing that I absolutely could not shut up about with this trial is the music is godlike. Like, the music of this game is just generally so great. Like, I'm gonna admit something that is gonna make me sound like a bit of a douche and like I'm betraying people. Like, I maybe not to that extent, but I still feel like this is a pretty controversial opinion. If I'm being completely and totally honest with everyone, I am not actually a big fan of Masafumi Takada's music. The Danganronpa music score is actually not that great. Like, well, not for me at least. It's got some standout ones, definitely. Like, I do listen to the soundtrack on a regular basis because I use it for some of my fanfics. But particularly if you've read my fanfic Phantom Thieves of Hope, I actually include the Danganronpa and Persona soundtracks in that fic. But if I'm being completely real, I don't think there's any... While I do think that the music score of Danganronpa is clever with some tracks, I'm actually generally not a big fan of Takada's music. Like, it's not really a... The Danganronpa track isn't a music track that I really listen to that often. Eden's Gardens OST, on the other hand, is an entirely different story. The music and the operatic stuff that happens in this chapter, and in the trial especially, the trial music in particular, is brilliant. Like, I genuinely... I'm gonna have to, like, pay... Look, in this next segment, I'm gonna play snippets of some of my favorite tracks in the trial, and you'll see what I mean. I really, really hope that music isn't copyrighted, because it's so good. Anyway, moving on, with that out of the way, and me having talked about the mystery and the music and everything that happens in this trial, I think the big thing I need to talk about is the culprit. Now, if I'm being completely honest about something, this is largely due to quite a few factors. Wolfgang being the victim of this trial was insanely shocking, but once that's out of the way, Eva being the killer is not that surprising to me. I think it's largely because of a few things. I think I immediately got suspicious of her because of the way that she kept trying to take control, the fact that she was putting pressure on Diana immediately, as well as the fact that, to my knowledge, she's the only person who wasn't gathered around the TV during the gaming sesh. She was right next to the vent, which she knew was there because we looked at it in the prologue, and there were just so many things that really made me think that Eva was going to be guilty, that, like, I kind of noticed immediately. And the fact when you lose the character who was set up to be the antagonist, the character who was set up to be the protagonist, or the deuteragonist rather, the sidekick character that Eva seemed to be with Damon, it didn't really blindside me as much because, as shocking as it was, I mean it is still incredibly shocking that we had Wolfgang and Eva be set up to be the antag and the deutag respectively, and then we lose both of them in the trial, or in this chapter. But at the same time, Eva was, on top of all that I've just said, Eva is the only one who actually made sense to be the killer. Because the thing with everyone in Eden's Garden is, when you actually look at all the characters, one thing that really confused me is the fact that everyone just appeared to be really safe. Like, there are characters in this game that you might not like as much, but nobody in this cast, like, at least not during the daily life, really gives you the vibe of, oh, they could definitely be the killer. Like, as I've already said, Eloise definitely feels like she could be a killer later down the line, or at the very least she's not making out of this game alive, I'm being completely real. But the thing with her is she's definitely got more material to be a Chapter 3 or 4 killer than a Chapter 1 killer. It didn't really make much sense for her to be the killer for the first trial. But other than that, everybody here just seemed like none of them, even the ones who are more rough around the edges like Grace or Winona, none of them seem like that they would be willing to kill anybody. Genuinely, they wouldn't. And I think this is largely because now that Wolfgang's gone, I feel like we might see a lot more pressure. But if you think about it, Eva is the only person who kind of made sense to be the killer, because she kept her talent a secret, and it's revealed in the trial why she did it, because this isn't the first instance where people have found out about her talent of Ultimate Mathlete, and it's actually like a really sore spot for her. She hates her talent, and she hates the fact that it ostracizes herself from people, and nobody in the cast of Eden's Garden was particularly nice to her about the fact that she kept her talent a secret. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about, kind of similar to how I was with Kai, of people assuming what things are like for her. And what I loved about it is, in the end, when Eva is finally out as the killer, and when she sort of explains that, like, everyone made her hate her, she just tells everyone to get fucked. Like, she hopes, after she's gone, that everybody dies, and that's really fair, like, because everyone was just so... Not only was everyone so horrible to her, but because of Wolfgang being wary of her from the beginning, Wolfgang kind of told everyone to keep Eva out of the group. And this is also just, like, the sad aspect of it. At the same time, though, if I'm being completely real, Eva's motivations were probably the weakest part of the trial for me, and I think not necessarily because of what they were, but the way that they were portrayed, because there were like 7 layers as to why she was the first killer, when there really didn't need to be. It could have just very easily been a matter of the fact nobody treated her nicely, and everyone sort of underestimated her, or like pushed her out because she was a liar, or because she wasn't as great as people thought that they were, when she's just as special. And it's this idea that Eva just has never like, the fact that she's so used to being mentally abused that she couldn't really hack it anymore. She thought she had a chance to change it, it blew up in her face, and now she was just, like, out of spite, willing to condemn everyone to death and get out herself. And you know what? That's selfish and egomaniacal to a T, but I love it because it's still, for some reason, not a motive you actually see very often in a Danganronpa game, where you have a killer who genuinely doesn't want sympathy, just wants to get out of the killing game to get out. There doesn't need to be any other incentive. They just want to go home. It's that simple, and I like that. My problem with it is all the other layers to it, in the fact that, like, she tries to justify it as, oh, Tozu made me do it. Whereas, as Desmond, I think, points out, the fact that, like, Eva tries to say Tozu made her do it, but Desmond points out, rightfully, that Eva was the one who, like, made the choice to get the trinket. Tozu didn't force her to do it. It was like, her motives for doing this were just so simple. I don't really understand why they weren't kept simple. Why she couldn't just be, I won't say cold-blooded, that's not really what happened. Why she couldn't just be just spiteful and frustrated towards everyone, and so loathing towards herself and her talent. And I don't know why it couldn't have been kept at that. I feel like there are like 6 layers to it that like didn't really need to be there. But that was my only issue. Another thing that kind of insinuated the fact that Eva could be the first killer, and this is another thing I saw on Tumblr. And again, shout out to you, whoever made this post, but one big thing that Eden's Garden has sort of carried from beginning to end is the fact that everybody in the cast is represented by some kind of animal. And that animal is kind of a hint. It's like, kind of like, obviously the game is Eden's Garden. It's based on the Garden of Eden from the Bible. And that's where all sort of the religious imagery comes in. The religious imagery is also part of the hint as to how this first chapter really came about. But as for the animals, every character is symbolized by a different animal. So Damon is a snake, Wolfgang is a sheep, Ava is a raven, Toshiko is a flamingo, Ulysses an owl, Desmond is a shark, Grace is a bunny, Diana is a chameleon, Jean is a dragon, Jet is a coyote, Kai is a butterfly, Mark is an alligator, Winona is a bear, Eloise is a swan, Ingrid is a lion, and Cassidy is a spider. And what somebody pointed out to people on Tumblr, and again, like I already said a couple times already, shout out to you, whoever you are, I don't remember your name, but good for pointing this out. Wolfgang being a sheep is a reference to him being a sacrificial lamb, and after the trial it is revealed that Eva specifically chose to kill him because she knew he'd be a problem and that he was the most worthy sacrifice she could make. Also, Eva herself is somewhat convinced, if we're to believe what she said, about how Tozu offered her the trinket, did it in a way that only the ultimate mathlete could figure out the puzzle in order to get the trinket, and kind of goaded her into murder. That would kind of mean that Eva's, if we're to believe her, was convinced into doing this murder, or like was given the push into doing this murder by an outside party. And then during the trial, she put the blame on Damon for a while after she was sort of pressured. And previously, she was trying to put the pressure on Diana, who is a chameleon and also some kind of lizard. This is effectively the same as the way that the Garden of Eden and how that story came to a close. Eve, who is one letter away from being Eva, was convinced into murder by an outside party, which in this case was Lucifer, under the disguise of a snake. And then when Eve committed her sin, she tried to blame the snake. Or when she committed her sin, everybody tried to pin it on her, and then Eve put the blame on the snake. The snake in this case, in Eva's case, being Damon. So I really, really like that imagery. And it also really does show the idea of how Eve really did feel out of place during the garden, and how she kind of got ostracized, like, through the fact of just being Adam's second. And I do really like this imagery, and it really, if this is the lengths that they're going to go to it, then looking at the Garden of Eden is really the best way to sort of anticipate what's going to happen in the future of this game. But all in all, one thing I really can't help but point out with Eva in this trial, and that what kind of interests me, is if you really think about it, Eva is kind of like what would have happened if Sayaka successfully pulled off her plan to kill Leon. Like, it was all of her, it was in her intention to kill Leon, frame it on Makoto or some other person, and because of her status as an idol, people would trust her more. But obviously, because of what was going on with Sayaka at the time, her plan backfired and she ended up the victim instead, and ended up almost redeeming herself in the end by trying to out Leon as her killer. Whereas in the end, Eva is sent to be this sort of decent character throughout the chapter, ends up being the killer, successfully kills Wolfgang, and in the end is just kind of remarkably unsympathetic. And I say that because there is obviously that conversation in the end where Eva sort of goes on to talk about how nobody really cared about her, and Diana chimes in and says, well, I cared about you, and which is true. Like, Diana was nothing but nice to Eva, and it just seemed really dickish for Eva to just pin the murder on her so easily. But Eva herself says it meant nothing, and as sad and cruel as that is towards Diana, it does kind of make sense, because when you go into Eva's backstory, the thing you have to keep in mind is Eva has never received love, or like she's only ever received attention for things that she doesn't like. People like in the past picked on her because of her talent as the ultimate mathlete. Her talent has given her nothing but struggles in her life, and it's gotten to the point where she's never received the love that she believes she deserves for her talent or for who she is, to the point that when she actually does receive that love, she can't recognize it. And so, as far as she was aware, Diana's actions towards her and the kindness that she showed were nothing more than a facade. And I don't really have a comment on whether or not Diana did actually care about Eva, because I haven't really seen enough of Diana's development yet, and we probably, based on that last cutscene, will get to see more of it after this trial. But the reason why Eva is the way she is because she doesn't understand what it's like to be cared for, and like she can only recognize pain, and she acts on that pain because she genuinely believes she doesn't deserve it, and there's this sad element to it. And this is why the motivation like sucks for me, because I really, really wish there was more focused, like direct attention given to that. And that's like my only big problem with this trial. And maybe it's just me, but that's kind of how I feel about it. As some final notes with the trial, I want to talk about the way it concludes. And I know I just said my biggest complaint was with the way that Eva's motivation post the trial was portrayed, but if I have a problem with the trial itself, it's the fact that the final hurdles are kind of a pain to sit through. The Toho style like shooter minigame, like the final minigame that you have to do in order to end the culprit, is so fucking tough. Like, it's not tough in like a nice way either. It's not challenging, it's just frustrating, especially if you've never, like, I mean, okay, it's a creative idea, I'll give it that, but that doesn't make it fun. Maybe I'm just not good at bullet hells, I don't know. Like, my friend, it took, when we played it together, me and Mega Comet, it took him about 3 tries in order to get it done. But another problem I have is, because that's a fairly minor problem, like, it's just something I'm not good at, it's nothing I can really fault the game for. The problem I have, and this is something new that has not happened in any other Danganronpa I've seen before, is the fact that the climactic reasoning, or like the manga summary at the end of the trial, what makes it stand out differently from any other Danganronpa game is Damon is not the only one who gives the summary. Everybody else, sans the killer, actually chimes in with the order of events. And I get it, why? Because realistically, in this kind of situation, nobody would be waiting for Damon to yap about everything they just talked about. And there would genuinely be discussions going on about how, oh yeah, this happened, we're all clear on this, right? But at the same time, I don't like it because with all these characters, it just makes it drag. And like the fact that everyone has to chime in. Like, you've had an entire trial to just sort of cut through your important discussions with random like dialogue. Can you not do it here? It kind of just like frustrates me, especially because at the time we did it, I needed to piss really badly. It just made it go on for so long. But obviously the other thing I have to talk about is Eva's execution. I'm not gonna spend too long talking about this, but it is just like I think we can all agree that like Strand of Agony, your heart out, man. Like I immediately, like when we saw it, I was like, oh, this is really like Kirumi's execution. I don't really know which between these two is crueler, but Eva's was longer. It's not only is it visceral, it's long. It's like a full, like, executions in this game normally last about, like, I want to say a minute at least, right? Or like around a minute. This one felt like it went on for like 3, and obviously I didn't time it, but it went on for what felt like a while. It was just a while of seeing Eva just experience absolute agony. And like, even like my friend Mega Comet, again, I'll keep talking about them, like, he rarely, like, ever reacts to executions unless it's a character dying that he cares about. Like, I remember, I wasn't actually there to see it, but he made it clear that, he really, really got upset with, Mikan and Gundam's executions, but so did I with Gundam's in particular. But Eva's is just so visceral, like, from start to finish, it's just constant pain. And the interesting thing, and the way that it ends, is that the last shot you see is of Damon crying, which is weird to me because the dialogue that, like, Damon doesn't say anything after the trial other than telling Toast to shut up, right? But when Diana has her, like, heroic monologue at the end, the last thing that you sort of see is when everyone else leaves, Damon mentions that Diana's monologue pissed him off. And I don't really see how they're going to take Damon's development from this point onward, right? Because, like, this was a really good chapter for Damon as well as every other character, because he's still a dick, but, like, he is, like, definitely more willing to communicate and, like, make something of his life. And he's not completely opposed to spending time with people. He's just so sure of himself, which makes me think there might be some kind of insecurity. And what I do believe is happening with this case is he's seeing how quickly Diana, who up until this point he's just brushed off entirely, Diana obviously, like, so very quickly was willing to admit that she wasn't okay, that she was upset over what happened, but also so willingly be able to adapt to make it so that the killing game won't happen anymore, and to sort of put herself in Wolfgang's shoes. The fact that Damon saw her do that pissed him off makes me think that what's really going on is Damon is jealous of the fact that Diana, who he is really not given much of a shit about for this game, is capable of doing that, whereas he isn't. He isn't able to just look beyond his weaknesses. He doesn't like admitting that he's not perfect, and obviously we might get more on this later, but Damon is a really good protagonist so far. Especially because, like, he's such a far departure from the likes of Makoto, Hajime, and Shuichi, because Hajime, Makoto, and Shuichi have nothing when they start the game. Like, Makoto is there based on luck, which already gives him some insecurity. Hajime obviously doesn't remember his talent, and Shuichi needs, like, Kaede to sacrifice herself and Kaito's encouragement in order to be strong enough to get through the trials. But Damon, I feel like, already has it all, but still has this insecurity that he's not good enough. And it's interesting to see that from someone who genuinely has a talent, right, and not based on circumstance. And that's what makes him such a good protagonist, and I'm really, really excited to see more of him. Okay, so I want to end this video off by going over, because something I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are going to be kind of curious about, which is where do I see this game going from here? And more specifically, with Eva and Wolfgang gone, the potential for how the rest of the Killing game could go out is really up to anyone's guess. Now, I don't know what the real reason why this Killing game is happening is. I could not begin to tell you why it's happening, because I haven't really looked that deep into the actual background, or if there's one thing that's putting all these characters together. But I can at least give my thoughts and feelings on how I believe the game is going to progress from this point forward. To start with, and obviously this is all up for debate, like I genuinely am not 100% sure on any of these placings. I'm just doing it based on the information that we've seen so far. And it largely has to do with the animal imagery of the characters, most of the time at least. But anyway, I think Damon, I'm fairly certain, is going to survive to the end of the game. I mean, after losing Wolfgang and losing Eva, I feel like, yeah, I really don't think Damon has any chance of dying at this point. Like, I don't know if they're going to do a Protag swap at any point in the game, and if they did, who would he swap to? I have no clue. But aside him, the two characters who I'm pretty confident will survive to the end are Mark and Grace. And again, this ties back into what I was saying about how I think Jet is going to be a victim. Somehow I think Jet is going to die, and his death is going to, like, finally push Mark into, like, maybe making better choices for himself. But at the same time, I'm not confident in this, because that really, again, as I said, kind of feels like just rehashing what happened with Himiko and Tenko. Obviously, Mark is a bit of a different character than Himiko, but it's the same kind of situation. But they clearly do have some kind of cool little friendship going on, and, I don't really know how it would end, but I am pretty confident that at least one of these two is going to die, and the other one is going to get it to the end. And of the two, I think Mark is more likely to be the one who survives to the end. As for any other survivors, I think Grace has a good chance of making it to the end. I feel like she could have some really good character development and could eventually get out the other side of the game in the end. I would quite like her to be honest, because I quite like Grace. I think this chapter did quite a lot of good for her, and even though I haven't seen her FTEs yet, I'm pretty sure they're gonna show more about her and what makes her tick, and I'm really excited for that. Now, what about the characters who are gonna die? Because other than those three, I'm pretty confident those three are gonna live to the end of the game. I'm not 100% sure, I genuinely couldn't be, but those I think are my three most likely candidates. I have 3 likely candidates for survivors, 3 likely candidates for Blackens, 3 likely candidates for victims, and a likely candidate for a mastermind/traitor beyond what we have. Everyone else I'm really not sure about. But anyway, the 3 characters who I think could be Blackens are ELOISE, Cassidy, and Winona. ELOISE for reasons that I've already gone over in this video, and I'm not really going to rehash them. But as for Cassidy and Winona, I know it seems insanely unlikely that Cassidy is going to be a killer. It really doesn't seem to make sense. But again, I think the thing that really rides on it is the stuff with the animal imagery. And I don't think Cassidy's got any skeletons hiding in a closet, because someone would have found out by now if that was the case. Like, the blackmail motive really opens up avenues for something. It's got a lot of potential is what I'm saying. And the thing is, Cassidy on the surface doesn't really seem like she would be a killer. The only reason why I think she could be a Blackened is because, again, of the animal imagery. And the same actually applies to Winona. Because Cassidy's animal is a spider. And spiders are well known for, like, killing prey by trapping them. And the fact that, she, like a spider, is also very attached to the web. A different kind of web, but a web nonetheless. And spiders are kind of... They are, like, deadly animals in some parts of the world, but more than anything, they are patient killers. So, they weave these sorts of webs for bugs and flies and whatever else they eat to fall into them, and then they strike. And obviously, people are really afraid of spiders. And I'm beyond that, really not sure about this one. I'm only putting Cassidy in the blackened because of everyone here, I think the spider imagery is probably the most likely thing to sort of hint towards her being a killer. But the same goes for Winona, because Winona, again, her animal is a bear, right? And going back to what we were saying about the Bible stories, there is a Bible story about someone named Alicia and the bears. And during that story, two bears maul like 40 children because they happen to make fun of a person. So it makes me think that maybe if we're to adapt something like that into this game, somebody could get on her bad side and lots of people will suffer for it. And again, I'm not sure, because Winona is kind of a jerk, but it's kind of the same way Byakuya was a jerk, where he's like just so full of himself and so sure of his ability that he feels he's untouchable. And I feel like Winona is the same case. But I feel like I haven't done a free time event, so maybe there is more humility to her than there appears to be. And again, Cassidy and Winona are only on here because of the animal imagery. I am much more certain that Eloise will end up having a darker side to her, for reasons, again, that I've already gone over. I am pretty confident that Jet, Ingrid, and Desmond will end up victims. They will end up the victims of the cases, as I've already said with Jet. I feel like a very likely situation based on his personality and Eloise's personality is there's a point where he could run his mouth, and because Eloise is very sensitive about this stuff, he could be the one to pay for it, right? Ingrid and Desmond, I just genuinely cannot see them making it out of this game in any way, but I also don't see either of them being killers. Desmond, I think, works a pretty good red herring because he happens to know his way around firearms, but I think we've already covered the fact that that he doesn't really use his guns to kill. I think it's more likely he'd be a victim, but at the same time, that's also kind of missing out on an opportunity for the ultimate marksman to have like a cool like murder trap where he like ricochets something off a wall, and only he could do it because only he's got the aptitude for it, right? But I do feel like Desmond is genuinely quite a nice person. I don't really see him making it out of this game alive. Same goes for Ingrid, and I feel like that could potentially give quite some character development to Toshiko as well. I feel like everybody in this game has a partner who, if they died, it would really suck for them. Like, for the most part, at least. I think, I feel like Diana kind of had that with Eva, and obviously she ended up having to go through the development she did because Eva killed Wolfgang and almost framed her for it. But at the same time, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, you also have characters like Grace and Wolfgang, and Grace clearly has changed her tune a little bit after Wolfgang's death and Eva's execution. We also have Mark and Jet, Eloise and Desmond, Winona and Ulysses, Ingrid and Toshiko. And I feel like Toshiko could have some potential development if Ingrid dies, if it wasn't for the fact that I thought Toshiko was the mastermind. Yeah, so I think Toshiko is probably the mastermind, or at least a traitor, and I obviously don't have much to go off of. I don't have much to go off of with any of these. We've literally just started the game. But the reason why I think she is the most likely person to be the traitor is because she just feels so out of place. Because like it's established very early on, even in chapter 1 and the prologue, when we learn everyone's ages by chapter 1. Toshiko, while not necessarily a child, is still the youngest person in the group. And it just feels really, really strange to me that she's 14 while everyone else is around 18 or above. 17-ish. I don't really know. I don't remember the ages off the top of my head. But everybody here is a different age. And Toshiko has by far the biggest gap of all of them. All of them are around the same age. Toshiko is definitely the youngest. So that already moves her out of place. The other thing is going back again to the animal imagery, which is the fact that Toshiko, as a reminder, is a flamingo. And flamingos, obviously, the obvious interpretation to make is that flamingos equal romance, which obviously she's the ultimate matchmaker. It's very on brand. But, and also they're very elegant animals, supposedly, which is also why she has such a traditionally Japanese style to her. But I think there's something really sus about, first of all, the way that she never lowers that fan, and she's so unassuming, but also so out of place. And as for the Bible imagery, the difference between most of the animals that appear in Eden's Garden, flamingos are the only one of these animals that doesn't really have any prevalent, unless I'm wrong, doesn't have any prevalence in the Bible, whereas like other things, like the snake, Desmond with the snake, obviously is like reference to Lucifer in the Garden of Eden. Wolfgang is a sheep because of the sacrificial lamb stuff, and that's why he dies first, right? What else? I mean, obviously there's no dragon in the Bible as well, so I guess you could also make an argument for Jean, but at the same time, the dragon could also represent like a monster or a sea monster that is, they do exist in the Bible. So there is stuff like that, and the flamingo just seems really out of place. And so yeah, I do think that there is more going on with Toshiko than she probably lets on, and I think largely the reason why she's even in the killing game is because she's so unassuming that it makes her like people not suspected to be the mastermind. And that leaves 4 other characters, which are Ulysses, Kai, Jean, and Diana. And I have absolutely no idea where the game is going to take these 3. Ulysses, I feel, could be a killer, potentially, because, again, animal imagery, his is an owl. Owls are silent predators. But beyond that, I really, really have no idea. Because if these characters are kind of hiding who they really are, they're doing it very well. And, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts so far. And yeah, I mean, again, that's basically all I have to say. Like, this was a completely, besides the notes, this was a completely unscripted review. So there are any points where it just sounds like I'm just like like now, for instance, where it sounds like I'm just struggling to think of what to say. It's largely because like that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to like give my thoughts on this in real time without scripting things, because I feel like if I was to script this, or if I was to write it down, the way I feel about it wouldn't really come across right. And Eden's Garden, just in general, if I can give my final thoughts on it, Eden's Garden's first chapter is brilliant. It is an amazing start, and God help me if this game doesn't keep this momentum going. Like, everything you've heard about Eden's Garden, every good thing you've heard about it is exactly correct. Any problems I have are just minor nitpicks, because this game is really good at blindsiding you. And I'm not gonna say it's already on the same levels of why I love Danganronpa 2. It's definitely not, because it's only one chapter. But I think if the rest of the game ends up being as good, if not better, than chapter 1, then this game has the potential to be not just the best Danganronpa, but has the potential to, like, genuinely outdo the original series. Like, my thing with, as prominent as they are, I think I've made it clear quite a few times in the past that Lineage and the Danganronpa Another series, while definitely good, do not come close at any point to actually, like, getting a leg up over the original series. I do not like the Another games more than I like the original Danganronpa series. Eden's Garden, if it keeps what it's currently got and runs with it, then we could have something genuinely super special here. And I want to give, like, just a final shout out to everybody who's worked on this game. The artists, the game designers, the musicians, the voice actors, like, there's so much love put into this. You can tell that the people who do this really, really cared. They care about capturing the original feeling of Danganronpa 10 years after the series first aired. We're very almost, I mean, as of next year or the year after, I believe we will actually be at the 10-year anniversary for V3, which is crazy to think about. But, yeah, the Eden's Garden is brilliant, and they try their best to capture the feeling of Danganronpa, while also showing off what they can do on their own as individual creators. And I'm sure if Kodaka had a chance to see what had come out of Eden's Garden, I'm sure he'd be proud. Like, I don't know if Kodaka has ever actually made statements on Eden's Garden, or any Danganronpa for that matter. I don't really think he can, considering it wouldn't really be a good look if he was to so explicitly talk about fan projects based on a game he made, but I'm sure that he probably would approve of it, because this game is just excellent. It's so far just like 10 out of 10, or 9 out of 10, I guess, if we're being completely generous. No real notes. But, yeah, that's really all I have to say at the moment. So, I'm sorry for how messy this review was. It wasn't really supposed to be anything conducive. I was just trying to spit out my thoughts to anyone who wanted to listen to it. And, yeah, that's about it. So, thank you all for listening, and hopefully I will see you later.